The Denver Broncos just got some incredible news that could mean a deep playoff run next season. While other teams in the AFC keep making questionable decisions and hurting their chances, the Broncos are in a prime position to take advantage. Two talented players have left the AFC West, making our path a little easier. But that's not all. An ESPN analyst has revealed that the Broncos could be one of the biggest spenders in free agency when the new league year begins next week. That's a huge statement, and it makes you wonder, who are they planning to go after? And just as importantly, who are they definitely not targeting? Jeremy Fowler, a well-respected ESPN analyst, isn't known for bold or reckless predictions. But he recently said something that should have every Broncos fan excited. Watch out, because Denver is in a position to spend big in free agency. Right now, the team has around $43 million in cap space, but that number could be stretched even further with smart contract structuring. Thanks to the deep pockets of the Walton Penner ownership group, the Broncos can front-load deals and spread out the cap hit, making their money work even harder. One player many fans thought the team might target was Zach Bond, but he just re-signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. At first, that seemed like a loss, until former Broncos safety Nick Ferguson reminded everyone what kind of inside linebacker Denver really needs. He posted a video showing the physical, intimidating presence the Broncos have had at that position in the past. Watching those highlights, especially from that legendary snowy game against the Raiders, brings back memories of hard-hitting linebackers who dominated the middle of the field. And when you compare that to Zach Bond, he just doesn't fit that mold. Instead, if the Broncos want to make a splash, someone like Dre Greenlaw or Nick Bolton would be a perfect addition. Fast, aggressive, and relentless. These are the kinds of players who strike fear into opponents and make offenses think twice before coming across the middle. To make things even more exciting, a Vegas sportsbook recently listed the Broncos as a top betting favorite. And if there's one thing we know, it's that Vegas rarely bets against the odds. Could all of this mean the Broncos are gearing up for something big? Let's hear your thoughts. Who do you think Denver should target in free agency? This is exactly why I don't promote sportsbooks. Vegas is in the business of making money, not giving it away. That's also why I stay away from sports gambling altogether. But when Vegas makes a bold statement, it's worth paying attention to. Right now, they have the Denver Broncos as the top team to land Davante Adams. Think about that for a second. We're talking about a top 20, maybe even top 10 wide receiver who could potentially be signed for a veteran minimum. That would be an absolute steal. If the Broncos can pull this off, it might be one of the biggest bargains in NFL history. Lately, I've been getting a ton of messages about another potential receiver move, DK Metcalf. With the Seahawks heading into a rebuild, Tyler Lockett is moving on, and Metcalf has officially requested a trade. Naturally, fans are wondering, should the Broncos try to get him? There's no denying that DK Metcalf is a freak athlete. If I had his physique, I don't think I'd ever wear a shirt unless I absolutely had to. But while his talent is undeniable, the price tag is a major problem. The Seahawks reportedly want a first and third round pick for him, and on top of that, he's going to need a massive new contract, something in the range of $30 million per year. That's a huge investment, especially when you consider that Broncos star cornerback Patrick Surtain already locked him down in their last matchup. Even with the refs allowing Metcalf to get away with push-offs and calling questionable fouls against Surtain, he still couldn't break free. So, giving up premium draft picks and a massive contract for a guy who struggled against our own defense, that just doesn't make sense. That's why I'd much rather take a low-risk, high-reward shot at Davante Adams. If it doesn't work out, the Broncos are only out a veteran minimum contract. But if it does, that could be a game changer. Another interesting name floating around is Allen Lazard. The Jets have reportedly given him permission to seek a trade, and there's one key detail that makes this intriguing. Sean Payton has always liked Lazard. He's a strong, physical receiver, and most importantly, he's a willing blocker in the run game. That's exactly the type of player Payton values, which is why guys like Lil Jordan Humphrey have stuck around on his rosters. With Aaron Rodgers no longer in New York, Lazard could be available at a reasonable price, and if Peyton wants him, the Broncos could make a move. Beyond wide receiver talk, there's more good news for Denver. The Raiders just made Max Crosby the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL, handing him a massive $35 million per year deal. Now, don't get me wrong, Crosby is a great player, but is he the guy who should hold that title? Personally, I think that honor should go to Patrick Surtain. Luckily for the Broncos, they locked Surtain into a very team-friendly deal, keeping him around for the next 3 years. He's an absolute shutdown corner, taking away an entire side of the field every game. Meanwhile, the Raiders just handed a huge chunk of their cap space to one player. That's the kind of move that could hurt them long term, and it's exactly the kind of mistake that benefits the Broncos. Everything is shaping up for Denver to make a serious push next season. What do you think? Should the Broncos go after Davante Adams, Allen Lazard, or someone else? And how do you feel about the Raiders' decision to break the bank for Crosby? Let's hear your thoughts. Here's a wild stat for you. ESPN's advanced analytics show that Max Crosby is now making around $100,000 per day and about $40,000 per play. Let that sink in. The Raiders are locked into that massive contract, and while other star players like Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb are waiting for their own big deals, Crosby is now one of the highest paid non-quarterbacks in the league. Meanwhile, the Broncos have been smart, locking down key players on team-friendly contracts that allow them to keep building for the future. And the good news keeps coming. The Chargers just released Joey Bosa, signaling that they're taking a big step backward. We already saw them collapse in the playoffs, with Justin Herbert throwing multiple interceptions in the biggest moments. Now, they're losing both Bosa and Khalil Mack, which means their once-feared defense is falling apart. That's exactly the kind of news Broncos fans love to hear. A tweet from Sarah Bettinger perfectly sums it up. The Chiefs traded a Pro Bowl guard, the Chargers cut Joey Bosa, and meanwhile the Broncos are preparing to spend big and keep improving. While our AFC West rivals are stepping back, we're pushing forward. That's the kind of shift that makes a real difference when the playoffs come around. Another team that seems to be heading in the wrong direction? The Cincinnati Bengals. In a loaded AFC, the Broncos will be competing with teams like the Bengals for a playoff spot. And while we already know the Ravens and Steelers will be tough, the Bengals might be the team that falls off. Last year, Cincinnati had an explosive offense, putting up video game numbers, but their defense was a major weakness. A perfect example, when rookie Bo Nix led a late-game drive to tie the game and force overtime, exposing just how weak their defense really was. The one bright spot on that defense, Trey Hendrickson, and now he's on his way out. The Bengals have a big problem. They need to hand out massive contracts to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, which means they won't have much money left for defense. That leaves them betting on simply outscoring opponents every game, a strategy that has never worked long-term in the NFL. Historically, teams with explosive offenses but weak defenses don't even make the playoffs, let alone go on deep runs. This is great news for the Broncos because not only are we competing with Cincinnati for a playoff spot, but we'll also be facing them in Denver next season. And if their defense continues to struggle, that matchup could be a huge advantage for us. Brandon Crystal put it perfectly. Why would the Bengals even make this move? Letting Hendrickson go makes no sense, and you can understand why he would want out. This raises an interesting question. Should the Broncos make a move for Trey Hendrickson? Let me know what you think. Should Denver go after Hendrickson, or is there another defensive player we should target instead? Now let's talk defense. I really like Nick Bonito. I love Jonathan Cooper, Elijah Garcia, and Damari Mathis, and we've got all of them on great deals right now. Zach Allen, love him too. Our defense is looking strong, and honestly, I'd rather spend big on the offense to make sure we can keep up with the firepower of other AFC contenders. But I want to hear from you. Would you entertain the idea of trading for Trey Hendrickson? What would you be willing to give up for him? Let me know in the comments. Now let's wrap this up with two huge pieces of good news. First off, Bo Nix was named Co-Offensive Rookie of the Year by the Senior Bowl, proving all the doubters wrong. Some people thought he was overdrafted, but clearly they didn't see what he's capable of. This guy is just getting started, and I can't wait to see what he does leading this team for the next 5 years. It's going to be a wild ride. The second piece of news is about Sean Payton, and it completely shuts down the critics who say he's overrated. Patrick Surtain was on the Rich Eisen show and shared a hilarious story about how Peyton motivates his players in a unique way. Before a big game, Peyton hung up Devontae Parker's stat line from a previous matchup, one where Parker had torched the Broncos. He put it right on Surtain's locker, reminding him all week about that tough game. That's next level motivation. And it clearly worked because Surtain has been dominant ever since. This just proves Sean Payton isn't the tyrant some people make him out to be. He's a master motivator and a coach players love to play for. If he wasn't, then why would so many of his former staff from New Orleans want to join him in Denver? And why would Super Bowl 50 champ Todd Davis leave a successful media career to join his coaching staff? It's simple. Peyton is building something special in Denver, and this team is on the path to a deep playoff run next season. Broncos country, get ready. And finally, on a lighter note, my colleague just got back from Mexico and brought me this hilarious Nacho Libre style Denver Broncos mask. It was only a few pesos, but you better believe I'll be wearing it during our playoff streams next season. Broncos country, let's ride.